Arrow Video has just released an incredibly wonderful deluxe edition of Walter Hill's The Warriors from 1979. I'm probably not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about The Warriors because you know The Warriors. If you don't know The Warriors, I'll spend a little time talking about it. So this is being presented in two different editions you can buy. You can buy the limited edition that's a Blu-ray set, or you can buy the limited edition 4K UHD set, which is all of the same contents and the same packaging between the two. It's just one is 4K and one is regular Blu-ray. So if you don't have 4K, I'm presuming you'd buy the Blu-ray, and if you do have 4K, I'm presuming you'd buy the 4K. I took a look at both versions. The 4K clear obviously is much sharper, or a bit sharper. See, I always feel like the difference between 4K and Blu-ray is rather subtle to my eye, and on my systems. I've got 4K TVs and I've got a 4K player. I looked at both. They both look fantastic to me. They both look the best I've seen the Warriors look. So either way, you really can't lose with this set. So The Warriors is a favorite of mine. It's a movie that I never really thought or heard much about for a large part of my life. I remember hearing about when it came out and there was violence in theaters and blah, 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 and it was some gang movie. And I finally didn't see it until much, much later, probably sometime in the 90s or even early 2000s. And I was like, where has this movie been hiding all my life? This movie's fantastic. It feels a lot like a John Carpenter movie. And that might be sacrilege because Walter Hill is an icon and he has his style. But every time I watch The Warriors, it feels like a John Carpenter movie. It feels like the movie it feels like a film that takes place before Escape from New York. Like before things got so bad and they closed off New York to be a prison island, The Warriors was showing you kind of where it was going. The music is very Carpenter. Barry Dvorak did an amazing score, and mixed with some really great like rock tunes of the period, or rock tunes done for the movie. And the cinematography it's just gorgeous how this thing is shot mostly at night. What is this film about, you fool, you fool? 2 minutes into this review. So if you don't know the Warriors, it takes place in a slightly. I'm sorry about this. I've got the sell sheet for it right here. The film takes place in a slightly futuristic New York City from when this was made in 1979. And there are just all of these gangs. So the film opens on Coney Island. The Warriors are a street gang based on Coney Island, very dilapidated Coney Island. And there's some big meeting of all the gangs that's going to happen in the Bronx that they have to go to. So they have to hop on the subway and ride 20-something miles to the Bronx and be part of this, what's going to happen. And basically what happens is, I'm not going to tell you the whole story. What happens is Cyrus, who's the leader of one of the gangs, proposes a truce and proposes joining all the gangs together to fight the police, and basically is proposing a peace talk or a peace treaty or what have you between all the gangs, and who are normally at each other's throat, and don't cross into my turf or it's going to be trouble. And something very bad happens and the Warriors get blamed for it by the person who did it. And then it's everybody. It's basically what I say are the words you want to hear at the end of every Jackie Chan movie, which is, there he is, get him. It's basically that happening with all of these gangs in New York City, with the aid of a radio DJ portrayed by a woman who went on to be on Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. She is sort of the Greek chorus. She's the narrator of the film, sort of. And she pops on and says, hey, everybody, price on the head of the Warriors. Go get them. So the Warriors are trying to get back through enemy territory, let's say, from the Bronx to Coney Island. And they're meeting up with a lot of resistance everywhere with people who want to kill them. So that's the story of the Warriors. Excellent film. Michael Beck is I guess, ostensibly the star of this film, who would go on to be in Xanadu and perhaps least importantly, Megaforce after that. And it's got some familiar faces, but really they were mostly unknowns at the time, and that's great. David Patrick Kelly is the bad guy who does the Warriors Come Out to Play thing, which you've probably heard about. He's wonderfully creepy and sleazy, and everybody in this is just great. So the Warriors is a fantastic film. It's an action movie. It kind of plays like a horror movie with the score and how it's cut and shot, and how, downtrodden New York was at the time. So it's a fantastic film. Baseline, it's a great movie. So I would say get this set for no other reason other than it's the best it's ever looked. It's a great movie, and it's got good extras. And I don't have a copy with the packaging. I get sent discs without the packaging. Packaging on this is unbelievable. It comes with a fold-out map of the New York subway system, or a map that traces the Warriors' journey, all kinds of stuff like that. So let's talk about the discs. I'm going to talk about the 4K and the Blu-ray. The 4K and the Blu-ray, the discs are identical. So the corresponding disc numbers, it's the same stuff. Disc 1 is the theatrical version. There's another version. Sort of, yes, and we'll get to that. Disc 1 is the theatrical version of the film. Looks great. Audio is English Mono 1.0, English Stereo 2.0, English Dolby Atmos, and English SDH subtitles. It looks amazing. It looks sharp. It's a great movie. I never get tired of it. There was one year, a few years ago, I was able to see The Warriors on 35 millimeter on the big screen 3 times in a year. I didn't mind. I never get sick of The Warriors. Extras. You get an audio commentary by film critic Walter Chaw, who did a book about Walter Hill, and it's great, and it gets into the making of the film and things that are not in the film that might have been written about, or might have been in the script or the original intent and all that. You get the isolated score, which is fantastic. It basically lets you watch the movie with just the music playing, and which is a kind of interesting way to watch films. I don't really do that very often because I'm always trying to watch something I haven't seen before, but isolated score was a very common thing on Laserdiscs in their day. And it was a sort of a way to get the entire score, which generally wouldn't fit on an album or wouldn't fit on a CD at the time. You get War Stories, interview with Walter Hill, 16 minutes. It's very good. You get Whole Lot of Magic. It is a roundtable discussion with screenwriter Josh Olson, who wrote History of Violence and co-hosts the Movies That Made Me podcast with Joe Dante. Filmmakers Lexi Alexander, who did Punisher Warzone, and Robert D. Krasowski, who did The Man Who Killed Hitler and then Bigfoot, which I've still not seen yet. Basically, it's them discussing their love of the Warriors and Walter Hill, and they're talking about filmmaking and how their experiences in filmmaking, how they can relate to what Hill went through in making the Warriors and all that. It's really cool. It's 85 minutes. So it's just about as long as the movie. It's fantastic. You get Battling Boundaries. I'm reading from my notes, so sorry about the eye line. Interview with editor Billy Weber. That was really cool. As somewhat of an editor myself, I always love hearing about the technique of editing and the psychological choices behind editing and the challenges that they found. Gang Style interview with costume designer Bobby Mannix about her work on the film. That's really cool, where she talks about her ideas. And basically, she had a list of gang names, and it was up to her to come up with what they look like. So part of what this set really drove home to me is that how much a collaborative effort filmmaking is, how many people are involved in making a film, and it's not just one person who comes up with everything, not usually. And it's not just like the director shows up and says, this is how everything's going to be. In this case, Walter Hill said to Bobby Mannix, I come up with some designs, and she came up with the logos for all of the gangs, for their clothes, for their hair, for their makeup, and it's a really cool delving into that, which ties into the next thing called Come Out and Play. It's called The Armies of the Night, and it was a look at the photos from her archive, and that is like, you wish you could just dwell on each of these photos forever and pause it. It's basically a still gallery, autoplay still gallery with music over it, 6 minutes long, but it's her character sketches, her original sketches for the logos, original script pages, original shot breakdown lists. It's just like the nitty-gritty of filmmaking, and it's amazing that she has kept it all this time and that you can just even get like a little peek at it. Come Out to Play is a Coney Island location tour that's 10 minutes, and it's with someone who is sort of a part of the Coney Island tourist board, if you want to call it that. And he grew up in Coney Island around the time of the Warriors. He remembered seeing it in the theater, and he walks around Coney Island basically talking about how it was then versus how it is now, and points out some of the spots. It's not like a scene matching. It's not like one of those things where it's like an exact match of the shots then and now. They do their best with some of it, but Coney Island has changed so much, I think it's not even physically possible to put the camera in some of the places that Walter Hill did back in 78. Sounds of the Streets. It's an appreciation of the film's soundtrack by film historian and composer Neil Brand. That's really good. That's 24 minutes. Archival special features. This is what I love about Arrow. This, to me, is what should be done as often as possible. That is, there have been previous versions of a lot of the things Arrow releases on Blu-ray. Arrow takes the extras from those old things and puts them on their new releases. So if you have the old version, you're getting the new stuff Arrow has to do. You're getting the new transfer and audio upgrades, but you can toss your old disc, is basically what I'm saying. So the archival special features, there's a lot. Basically, it was one big documentary that was broken up into parts. So you get it involves a lot of the cast and crew, and it's from the original 2005 Blu-ray release of the alternate version, which we'll get to in a second. So you have what's called The Beginning, that's 14 minutes. You get Battleground, and it's basically the stages of production in the story. Beginning is 14 minutes, Battleground 15 minutes, The Way Home 18 minutes, and The Phenomenon 15 minutes. Theatrical trailer is 2 minutes, looks great. Image gallery is 8 minutes, and that's set to music, just autoplay set to music. You get disc 2. Okay, so that's disc 1. All that stuff is on disc 1. So you watch the movie, that's almost 2 hours. You get the commentary, that's almost 2 hours, and then the extras are another 2 or 3 hours. So it took me a while to get through all this, but it was a pleasurable journey. Unlike that the Warriors had to make. The 2005 alternate version is disc 2. So in 2005, Walter Hill was approached. Okay, when we hear director's cut, there is such a thing as the director preparing a cut of the film and the studio says, you got to make it shorter, you got to change this. That's a director's cut. Most of the time, what we see now as director's cuts that are coming out on video or back in theaters are the studios coming to the directors and saying, can you do something to make us a version of this film we can release again and charge people for that's different? William Friedkin's Exorcist, the version you've never seen, was one of those where they'll go back to people. And that is, I guess, the version that really he ultimately wanted people to see. But a lot of times it's just, can you put something in here? And the directors sometimes begrudgingly will say, okay, here's some scenes that, didn't really work, but we'll stick them back in, or they'll tweak things and they'll mess with things. I almost said they'll F with things. And Walter Hill did that. He always wanted this film to be a comic book style film in that it's not really realistic and it's kind of outlandish in some ways. And he always saw it as this allegory for a very famous Greek battle and journey where the Greek army soldiers were trapped behind enemy lines, and to get back to safety, to get back to the water, they had to go through enemy territory. So this version, this alternate version of the Warriors, has a new intro that's sort of artwork with Walter Hill's voiceover. Honestly, it feels pretty cheap. It doesn't really feel organic to the film that we know as The Warriors. And then throughout the film, its scene transitions are done in a comic book style. So somebody will deliver a line, and instead of just cutting or dissolving or doing the wipe that the original film had, it'll freeze, and then it'll slowly go into like a comic book image where it looks like a drawn art panel, and then it'll zoom out on what looks like a page of multiple panels, and it'll zoom in on another panel, and it'll look like a comic book, and it'll fade back to reality and say "Meanwhile" in comic font on the corner. It's really distracting. I didn't watch the entire film that way. I sort of skimmed through it because I'd always heard about this, and I'd heard that fans really didn't like this. There is a little intro. There's not much in the way of extras on this version. This film the alternate version comes in English 5.1, English Stereo 2.0, English SDH subtitles, English, that's it. It's 94 minutes, and the extra it's an archival piece from that release with Walter Hill. It's a minute and a half. It's in 4:3, as is all the archival stuff on the previous disc. And basically, he says, this is the version I always wanted to do. I know some people will prefer the old version, and that's fine, but here's the way I always intended it to be, and I hope you enjoy it. And then it plays out. And really, to me, it takes me out of the film. If you're a fan of The Warriors, maybe it's an interesting way to watch it if you want to like spice it up a little bit. But otherwise, I don't see... I see disc 2 in this set as remaining very, very shiny. Let's put it that way. So that's all I have to say about The Warriors. This film is fantastic. It's the definitive edition from Arrow Home Video, Blu-ray or 4K, available now.